So, would you state your name for us?
Joe Miller Ross.
Okay, so anything anybody else want to say right now?
I want you to tell us your parents' name, where you were born.
You don't want to say anything? Anybody wants to add anything?
Okay, if I leave out anything, my parents' name or father, and this is an issue here, is Carl Ross. That's my father. Actually, his name was probably Colonel Frederick Ross. I found out because of a Union colonel that his grandfather had fought in with the Union Army. And when Boswell Ross, the person I'm speaking of, came back, apparently when Edmund Ross, Boswell Ross's son, had a child, he named my father Carl Frederick, which was Colonel Frederick. But down through the years, it became Carl Frederick Ross. That was my father. And my mother is Laura Ross, and she's from the Dimley side. Her mother's name was Laura Dimley, and so she married my father, Carl Frederick Ross, and the Dimley became Laura Franklin. By the way, her name is the same as her mother's. Her mother was also named Laura Franklin. Okay.
And you were born where?
I was born at Foote, Mississippi, on the Mount Holly plantation in 1943, August 11th, and I was delivered by Phoebe Carroll. That was the midwife on that plantation at the time I was born. And her name is on my birth certificate, and all of the birth certificates of people in that area were born around that time. Okay.
So I'm asking, could you just give us something you would want to relate about what it was like growing up in Foote, Mississippi?
A typical plantation at that point, you had the sharecroppers, and you would have a plot of land based on the size of your family that you would grow cotton on, and you'd have a small space for a garden and a dwelling. And contrary to popular belief, you had to pay for that. You had to pay for that land. And at the end of the year, when they settled up, you could come out in debt, okay? Now, that was the way the sharecropping worked. You had to pay for everything. And the education, if you want me to speak about that, was very poor, because at that time, they only had 7 or 8 months of schooling for blacks, because you were expected to work in the fields during the time when the cotton had to be picked and so forth. So where it worked out was the cotton picking and chopping time was such that you could only have about 6 or 7 months free to go to school, okay? And there were no high schools for black people in the area where I grew up at the time in 1943. So the best education you could get was maybe 7th grade. And had my father not been put off of the plantation in 1954, we probably would have still been on that plantation with no high school available. So by him being actually forced off of the plantation, and that's another story, we went, well, I'll tell you about it. We were forced off of the plantation. Okay. And it happened like this. Okay.